come on. As I was saying, one of the nice things about Zoom is that people generally come to the meeting on time. So maybe it being 7 o'clock, we can get started. Of course, I just lost my screen for some reason. So let me just, there, now I can see everybody. Well, good evening, everybody. I hope you all had a good New Year's celebration. My name is Jeffrey Katz, as many of you know, and I'm the president of the Washington Map Society. So I'd like to welcome you all to tonight's program, or today's program, depending on where you are. It is virtual by partnership with 7 map societies representing all parts of the country. So we have the California, Chicago, New York, Phillips, Rocky Mountain, Texas, and Washington Map Societies participating. All of us are nonprofit organizations that support map collection, cartography, and the study of cartographic history. And we also supply financial support for this Zoom meeting. So my little pitch, if you're not a member, we hope you will consider joining at least one map society. Each society has its own benefits. Speaking for the Washington Map Society, members receive 3 annual issues of the Portalon, our journal, digital access to all past issues of the Portalon, digital access to past guest speaker lectures, and many other features in the members only section of the website, which allows you to connect easily with other members. If you are not a member, we have an introductory rate of $25 for the first year of digital membership, $10 if you are a student. We and our partner societies would like to thank also our advertisers who support our groups and also make possible the publication of our journals, in particular, the Portalon and Lafayette, the Journal of the California Map Society. So a couple of housekeeping before we get really started. Note that the lecture, as they generally are, will be recorded. So please turn off your video and microphone if you don't want to be recorded. So at the conclusion of the talk, we will be taking questions. Please use the chat feature and you can type in questions that will be addressed later on. So with that little introduction, I'd like to turn the program over to Ron Grimm, our Vice President and Program Chair. Ron?
Hey, thank you, Jeff. Okay, in consultation with several of the other program chairs of the other map societies, we have developed a monthly program schedule of both Zoom and in-person meetings through June. That schedule will appear very soon in the next issue of the Portalon, which will be coming out in the next week or two. And I will circulate that list to the program chairs of the other map societies. Our next meeting will be on February 16. It'll be a Zoom meeting starting at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. It will feature John Hessler, who recently retired from the Geography and Map Division, Library of Congress, along with 2 Library of Congress GIS research fellows, Catherine DeSenza from the University of Florida and Anika Gilman from Tulane University. The title of their talk is The Mapping of Race in America, the Legacy of Slavery and Redlining from 1860 to present. They will explain their plunge during the summer of 2022 into a mass of historic data relating to racial demographics when they started to apply GIS tools to some of it. They sought to answer 3 questions about the history and legacy of the mapping of race. Who was doing it? Who was using it? and what were they using it for? And now it's my pleasure to introduce this evening's speaker, Andrew Kapochunas, Secretary of the New York Map Society, member of the Lithuanian Cartographic Society, and a retired data and processing consultant. This meeting was organized with the help of the New York Map Society. The title of Andrew's presentation is "The Struggle of Mapmakers to Keep Up with Changing Post-World War I Boundaries Between Lithuania and Poland." He will examine how map and atlas publishers struggled to depict redrawn Europe, particularly Poland and Lithuania, after World War I officially came to an end in 1919. Especially as Russian, Polish, Lithuanian, Latvian, and German armies continued to jockey for possession of land. Andrew will address a few of your questions at the conclusion of the presentation. If you have questions, please add them to the chat feature during or at the conclusion of the presentation. And now I turn the program over to Andrew.
Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for attending tonight. I'm going to be talking about why map makers and atlas publishers used as World War I was happening, as it ended, and for years afterward, trying to depict the boundaries of Poland and Lithuania, and actually as well, the future Belarus. But I have to do a little bit of history up front for you to understand exactly what was going on. Because as you see in these two maps here, both by C.S. Hammond, one in 1919, one in 1920, the map on 1919 is based, I'm positive, on a 1918 German map of occupied Lithuania. Even though the title of their map was the New States of Europe, they really didn't know what those new states were going to look like. And it was only a year later with the same publisher in their modern atlas talking about what was going to happen after Versailles, actually used boundaries that relate to the Grand Duchy of Lithuania, which existed from the 13th century to 1795. So as you can see, they were guessing, they were speculating. In the 15th century, this was the largest extent of duchy in green. Poland was in orange. Grand Duchy was a warrior state. It actually was a kingdom with one of the leaders who brought together the various tribes. In 1250, Mindaugas was crowned King of Lithuania, and that kingdom lasted all of 10 years, which is how long it took for his rivals to assassinate both him and his sons. Next to that map is a 1931 map, Rand McNally of Europe, to show you what this part of the world looked like in between the wars. And you see how diminished Lithuania is and how much larger Poland is. Now, this area, Poland, which they gained after World War I with the agreement of the great powers. Today, current estimates are that only about 15% of the people in those areas actually were Polish. How that happened is part of what I'm going to be discussing today. just before 1569, this was what those two countries looked like. The Grand Duchy on the right, Poland on the left. Lithuania was feeling a great deal of pressure, both from Sweden and from Moscow, and felt that it had to form a more specific political union with Poland in order to meet those challenges. This is what that area looked like immediately after 1569. And as you can see, Poland's area increased radically. Something like 40% of the Grand Duchy was taken over and occupied by Poland. Well, why did that happen? Well, the Poles at the negotiating table wanted specific givebacks. They wanted the right to buy land in the Grand Duchy, which they had never been able to do. The Lithuanians refused, they walked away, and Poland walked away for a while. But Lithuanians came back to the table and they said, all right, you've got that area, but we want our own ministries, laws, treasury, and our army. And the resultant union lasted over 225 years. What happened in the next few hundred years, lots of maps were made of the area, and many map makers, following the type of depiction that Thomas Kitchen did in 1762, he titled this map simply a map of the Kingdom of Poland. And the label for Lithuania was of a size that made it look like it was a province of Poland, not that it was an equal partner, the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. Other map makers, Lotter, titled their maps the Kingdom of Poland and the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. But there was certainly a history, and it's going to be many hundreds of years of history where people were used to seeing a map of the area saying Poland. And in fact, it reminds me of many years ago, I was at Library Le Bail in Paris looking for maps of the Lithuanian area. And what I was told is that you won't find any maps of Lithuania. They're all Poland. It's a common saying, even in the Lithuanian community, that Lithuania disappeared from the map of Europe after the third and last partition of 1795. But it actually left the maps created in the Russian Empire. In fact, this is a from 1800 of Litovskoye gubernia. This is what the Russians, having occupied this area, called it Lithuania. By 1837, there was, sorry about that, the Grand Duchy had been gone for over 40 years. The 1830 Polish uprising failed, and there was an emigration of patriots going primarily to France, who wanted to keep alive the hopes for Polish independence. And Van Samer was a patriot / map maker, because what he did on maps like this was he titled them Poland. There is no label or any marginalia with the name Lithuania. And he called a map of Poland and the neighboring countries according to the languages of it, with the darkest pink being Polish, the light pink being Belarusian and Ukrainian, and the yellow being Lithuanian. Edward Stanford in 1863 followed the tradition of titling the area Poland. This is their map of the Kingdom of Poland. And again, nowhere on the map is there a label or marginalia saying anything about the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth or indeed the name Lithuania. Instead, it says the Kingdom of Poland extended all over the territory colored yellow, red, and green, and the Polish tongue was the national language. This is the attitude that informed the people at Versailles, who were tasked with determining the boundaries of Europe. As far as they were concerned, it was Poland that needed to be revived. Meanwhile, in Russia itself and in Poland, they continued publishing maps. The 1891 Belarusia and Litva, the 1911 map by Polish cartographer Bazowitz, the Mapa Litvi Rusi, generally considered this area to be Lithuania. The three gubernia of Kovno, Vilna, and Grodno were considered Lithuania in Russia, even though there was no political entity at that time with that name. And an amazing thing happened. In 1897, the Russian Empire performed its first and only census of all inhabitants. And they inferred ethnicity by asking households, what was the primary language in the household? And what they found on this map, I've colored results from that census in violet. Those are areas where there were more Lithuanian speakers than Polish speakers, and in green, where according to that census, there were more Belarusian speakers than Polish speakers. You'll remember, if you were 1931 map or the interwar map, this is the area that, again, was ceded to Poland at the time. Even though Vilnius was where 40% of the population identified as Jewish, which the census considered Jewish a language. In fact, what was being spoken by the Jews in that area was a dialect of Yiddish called Litvish, whose boundaries even today, given the dialect of the people who are Jewish still in that area, roughly approximate the boundaries of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania. Now, both Polish and Lithuanian patriots were hoping to reestablish their countries as independent countries, and they took different tacks. At a December 1905 conclave in Vilnius, 2,000 Lithuanian activists agreed with future first president in 1919, Antanas Smetona, that the idea of Lithuania was no longer the boundaries of the Grand Duchy. At its greatest extent, they were conquered lands of mostly Belarusian and Ukrainian speakers. And they said that they would hope to establish an independent country that would be limited to 3 Russian gubernias and areas where Lithuanians predominated. This is the picture of Smetona, the first president of Lithuania. Now, Polish mapmaker and future delegate to the Versailles Peace Conference, Roman Dmowski, created an ethnographic map in 1908 that was based on that 1897 Russian census. And you see, this is you could say is the Polish homeland, with a small area around the city of Vilnius. Vilnius, which was the historic capital of the Grand Duchy, was never part of the Kingdom of Poland. By 1919, and I'll refer to this map in a few more slides onwards, this was his vision of Polish speakers in the area. All of a sudden, there was in darkest red, this was supposedly the land of Polish majority. And you can see how it differs from his map of 11 years previous, where he was using the 1897 census. So what could have changed in the meantime? This is, on the left, is a 1912 ethnographic map by a Polish mapmaker ethnographer that showed a relative percentage of Polish speakers, again, using that 1897 census, with the darkest blue being 80 to 100% Polish, but with 5 different variant colors depending on the percentage of Poles. By 1915, a patriotic group, the Polish Union of Progressives, published a variation of this map without any new information, but suddenly the darkest red was for 50 to 100%. So 5 gradations were now summarized as 1, and all of a sudden, the majority Polish got quite a bit into this area and into an area that would be future Ukraine. Now, what could have changed in the meantime? What ethnographic information could have affected these maps? Well, there are only 2. The 1897, the one and only Russian Empire census, the results of which were published until 1905. The second census, which was scheduled for 1915, was canceled because of World War I. And then the Germans, who occupied that area, the Lithuanian area, in an area they call Ob-Ost, actually did 3 censuses, and only the last one is considered to have any validity. And it was performed December 1916 to January 1917. And the reason they think that that was the most accurate is that in order to get a food ration card under German occupation, you had to participate in the census. Now, what could not have affected that map that you saw was the first census in Russia that had ethnicity, which didn't happen until 1926. The first Polish general census, which didn't happen until 1921, and then was only a partial census, including only part of the Vilnius region. The balance counted 1923, and it couldn't have included the first Lithuanian census. 1923 was the only interwar census in Lithuania, and it did not include Vilnius or Klaipėda, which were not part of Lithuania at the time. And what they found is in their regions, it was 84% Lithuanian, 7.6% Jewish, and 3.2% Polish by language. Now, the Poles disputed the results of that Lithuanian 1923 census by saying that it should have been 10% Polish and 76% Lithuanian, because they considered anyone who voted for a Polish politician to be Polish. Meanwhile, both American cartographers, like those at the Smithsonian and in the UK, were still creating and publishing ethnographic maps that basically were on the 1897 Russian census. There was no effort to change anything that of the results of that 1897 result. And even Eugeniusz Romer in 1916, in his atlas, published in Poland, showed this area with this darkest brown being actually the second darkest, 25 to 50% Polish in the Vilnius area, surrounding it 5 to 25% Polish, and this area here, which became part of Poland in the interwar years and was later ceded back to Belarus, was only 1 to 5% Polish. This atlas was actually smuggled to the United States and was used by Wilson's primary map expert at Versailles, Isaiah Bowman, who was also at the time the president of the American Geographical Society and had been a friend of Romer's since 1912. Even as World War II raged, given the 1837 Bansamer map, the 1863 Stanford map, and now you had New York publisher F.A. Ferris overprinting Hammond maps, which again erased the idea of Lithuania and the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. But we know better now, right? Well, this is the page of the US State Department Office of the Historian, and it supposedly gives a history of relations between the United States and each country. And what it starts out with is at the height of its power, the Commonwealth of Poland included Lithuania, Belarus, and much of Ukraine. The Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth was actually called the Commonwealth of Poland for 2 years, in 1791 and 92, but it was hardly at the height of its powers because it had already gone through one partition. The Lithuania page at the Office of the Historian is the United States first established diplomatic relations in July 1922. That's more than 4 years after Lithuania declared independence. It and the other Baltic states were not granted recognition for 4 years. Now, what could this page have said about a history of the United States and Lithuania? Well, what it might have referred to, as it does on the Polish page, is talking about Thaddeus Kosciuszko, who was both a Polish patriot and came to the United States and fought in the Continental Army. Well, when he wrote his last will and testament in 1806, here's what he said. Know, all men, by these presents, that I, Tadeusz Kosciuszko, formerly an officer of the United States of America in their Revolutionary War against Great Britain, and a native of Lithuania, do hereby will and direct at my decease. So he was born in the Grand Duchy, and he always considered himself a citizen of Lithuania. Now, I'd like to tell you about 3 key Polish individuals who were involved in setting the borders between Lithuania and Poland, and 2 of them were delegates to the Paris Peace Conference. The first is Roman Depict, whose maps we've seen earlier. He signed the Versailles Treaty, and he was Poland's Minister of Foreign Affairs. Well, in a biography published in 1946, there was an inkling as to his thoughts about Lithuania and Poland. He said, the author said, Dmowski did not view Lithuanians as having a strong national identity, viewing their social organization as tribal. Those areas of Lithuania that had either Polish majorities or minorities were claimed by Dmowski on the grounds of self-determination. In the areas with Polish minorities, the Poles would act as civilizing influence. Only the northern part of Lithuania, which had a solid Lithuanian majority, was Dmowski willing to concede to the Lithuanians. Second was General Joseph Pilsudski, who was chief of state from November 1918 to December 1922. His dream was to basically recreate a kingdom of Poland along the lines of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. he envisioned a Polish between the seas, from the Baltic to the Black Sea, comprised not only of Poland and Lithuania, but of Ukraine, Belarus, Latvia, and Estonia. Third was Ignace Paderewski, a famous artist of the turn of the century, also a delegate to the Paris Peace Conference, and appointed by Pilsudski to be the Prime Minister of Poland and Minister of Foreign Affairs. He acted as a mediator between the competing views of Dmowski and Pilsudski. Now, between April 1915, when he arrived in the United States, and November 1918, Paderewski gave over 300 speeches promoting the idea of an independent Polish state, country, and at the same time as many. His friendships with leading politicians got him a meeting with Wilson. It was Paderewski's memorandum to him on Poland that resulted in Wilson's speech in front of Congress, where he said, statesmen everywhere are agreed that there should be a united, independent, and autonomous Poland. And on the January 8th, 1918 speech to Congress, Wilson explained his 14 points. He talked about countries being reimagined, redefined, and those included Belgium, Austria-Hungary, and Turkey. And point number 13 was creation of an independent Polish state, which should include territories inhabited by indisputably Polish populations. You'll note that it's not majority Polish populations, but just inhabited by Polish populations. And again, the 14 points did not include anything about Lithuania or the other Baltic states. They were basically not on the radar of anyone at Versailles. Occupying German cartographers created maps of the area. And you'll see now that that map on the left, the 1918, looks very much like that 1918 C.S. Hammond map of the future map of Europe, including Lithuania. That map on the left was military areas. The map on the right was distributed to anyone. And again, it's that same area. This was map number 6 in Isaiah Bowman's Black Book, the American Cartographic Team's secret document for the Paris Peace Conference 1919 to 20 negotiations. And you'll notice that the area marked Poland, again, is very much the same as the 1897 Russian census. Lithuania, again, that smaller area is Lithuanian majority. There's a purple area where they say there's mixed speech. And there's an area here that says possible addition to Poland, which is in fact what happened. I have here actually the written recommendations for Polish-Lithuanian borders, referring to map number 6 from the Black Book. And it says it's recommended that an independent Polish state be established, which shall include indisputably Polish populations. See map number 6, that a union of Poland and Lithuania be effected if possible, boundaries to be shown as map 6. And if it's not affected, that Poland be established as mutually independent states, boundaries not as shown on map 6, but adjusted to the ethnic facts in the districts. Well, now let's look again at that Dmowski map with the areas in dark red being supposedly majority Polish. The legend of this map says that it has been updated with 1917 German census results. And remember, before 1919. This is the only census that could have affected percentages apart from the 1897 Russian census. And on the right is the Black Book Poland recommendations. Lithuania in the legend is misspelled, and it mirrors Dmowski's map. But was the ethnicity valid? Well, I happen to possess the census results of the 1917 German census, and I'm comparing it here to Dmowski's map. And below you have districts with the German census percentages of Poles versus Dmowski's percentages. And as you can see, they bear no relationship at all. With even the Wilna German census, where I've used the underline, this is for the city of Vilnius, 32% Polish. Dmowski has it as 83%. They had to be aware of the numbers in the 1917 German census, and they were apparently ignored. Meanwhile, delegates to Versailles were being bombarded with propaganda maps promoting one set of boundaries. This was an unsigned map by Eugenius Romer, where the darkest red is supposedly Polish majority. It added up all the Poles in the world. There's no mention, again, of Lithuania at all. And you can see just barely in red the ancient Polish Republic. And of course, it was never a republic. It was a parliamentary monarchy. When you have a king and a grand duke as the highest level of the government, you're not a republic. In a republic, it's the people and the people that they elect. Belarusians had their own axe to grind. And you can see in this map, territory claimed by the Belarusian National Republic, that as far as they were concerned, the Vilna gubernia, including the city of Vilnius, should belong to Ruthenia Blanche, to White Russia. And this has been their argument all along, that they are the inheritors of the Grand Duchy. And you'll see later on a bit more about the propaganda cards that the Belarusians generated and sent not only to Versailles, but to the great powers. Of course, the Lithuanians created their own ethnic map as well. And this one was printed in Switzerland and published in France, as well as in English. And the interesting thing is it had 13 levels of Lithuanian, from darkest red to pink. And they promoted this at Versailles. Even though they didn't have a seat at the table, they made sure that everybody there saw this map. So World War II supposedly ended, but the chaos did not end. The Russian Civil War continued, the Red Army and others versus the White Army. In 1918, there were declarations of independence. Lithuania on February, as well as in Estonia, Latvia, November 18th. None of the three were invited to Versailles, and all three were unrecognized by the US for more than 4 years. Poland declared independence November 1918, was recognized by the US 2 months later and invited to Versailles. And why not? They had a history. They were Poland. The map said so. The Lithuanian-Soviet War lasted from December 1918 to August 1919, Lithuanian and German volunteers versus Russians and Belarusians. In 1919, the Polish army overran most of Lithuania, Belarus, Western Ukraine. At the end of its own war with Russia, Poland established a new frontier far to the east of the Curzon line, which was one of those recommended by the great powers and then ignored. There was even a Lithuanian-Bermontian war from July to December 1919, where you had Lithuanians fighting Baltic Germans and freed Russian POWs in northern Lithuania. And you had the Lithuanian-Polish War, May 1919 and November 1920, where the Suwalki and Vilnius regions were disputed and where the Zeligowski mutiny occurred. This is the opening session of Versailles. 30 countries were invited to sit at the table, including Poland. Germany and the Central Powers on the losing end of the war were not invited to attend, and neither were the Baltic states. So here we have, I'm starting a few years worth of maps being published by cartographers who were speculating on what the boundaries would look like. The 1918 American Victory Map of Europe, again, looked to the Grand Duchy boundaries as a possibility or even a likelihood. The Coming Europe showed a similarity to the 1918 German occupation map. And as you'll see in the legend of that map, it was actually loaned by the American Geographical Society to the conference at Versailles. The 1918 Daily Telegraph War Map number 29 showed German peace boundaries. Not really. The 1918 F.A. Ferris overprinting of a Hammond map showed a map of liberty and peace for every nation, again, guessing at the boundaries. Every map that you've seen on this page, by the way, including the 1918 Harmsworth Atlas Baltic States map, shows the Vilnius area within the boundaries of an independent Lithuania. A year later, J. Forrest was publishing Europe Divisions Politiques, showing the Vilnius area in Lithuania. The 1919 Lithuanian Republic, this was a propaganda map distributed among Versailles participants, showing the Lithuanian participants' hopes of what their boundaries would look like. That 1919 C.S. Hammond map that I showed you on the very first slide, under the title Proposed New States. The 1919 Rand McNally map of New Europe, again showing Lithuania with Grand Duchy boundaries. Another 1919 C.S. Hammond map, and even an Italian map showing a very short-lived Baltic Republic that was supposed to be a union of Lithuania and Latvia, an idea that didn't last too long. Although this map was the first one that did not show Vilnius within Lithuania. Published 1920, after the Paris Peace Conference ended, the National Geographic Society map of Europe showing countries as established by the Peace Conference. Well, maybe. Lots of dotted lines. They weren't sure where Vilnius was, but to be safe, they put it within Lithuania. They had that stretch of land, which the Dmowski map said was majority Polish. They figured that would go to Poland. Same here in Bartholomew's political map of the new Europe with Vilnius and Lithuania. An Artaria map published in Germany, again, Vilnius in Lithuania. A Harmsworth Atlas map showing, which was the Vilna gubernia within a independent Lithuania. A French map, and finally a Polish map showing a map of the Republic of Poland with the Vilnius area, in Poland. So let's talk just for a minute about what happened in the Polish-Lithuanian War. General Zeligowski, on orders from General Pilsudski, staged a supposed mutiny by Polish troops and overran the Vilnius and Suwałki region. The Lithuanian counteroffensive was stopped by the League of Nations. Lithuania declared Kaunas its temporary capital. General Zeligowski created a state, Central Lithuania. The League of Nations established a neutral strip and prepared a plebiscite to see what the people in that area, who they would want to be part of. It never happened because neither country really wanted a plebiscite. Both Polish and Lithuanian negotiators asked the mediator to construct an election. Mediators from Great Britain, they couldn't agree on the terms. In October 1921, the Republic of Central Lithuania scheduled a January 1922 election at which only Polish parties and groups proposed candidates. Well, it was boycotted, mostly by non-Poles. 41% of Belarusians, only 15% of Jews, and that's only 1.4% of Jews in Vilnius, and 8.2% of Lithuanians who were in the area actually voted. The results were unrecognized not only by the Lithuanian government in Kaunas and the League of Nations, and the League issued a statement that the elected parliament was not a legal representative of the population. Well, so what? The parliament voted to incorporate into Poland. Central Lithuania ceased to exist as of March 24, 1922. And finally, the border changes were accepted by the League and by the US, but not by Lithuania. Here's just one little map showing the various agreed to and then ignored temporary borders. This is what we're giving Mapmakers fits. In purple are the current borders of Lithuania in that area. Back to Belarus for a moment. This is a propaganda postcard saying, "Down with the infamous Riga partition of March 28, 1921. Long live a free peasant individual Belarus." That ended, the Peace of Riga ended the Polish-Soviet War and set interwar boundaries between Poland, Russia, who was acting in behalf of Belarus, and Ukraine. The Polish-Lithuanian border was left for them to finalize. So this Peace of Riga led to 4 million Ukrainians, over 1 million Belarusians living in the area, being ceded to Poland. Current estimates are that in that area, only about 15% of the population was actually ethnically Polish. This is my last omnibus map slide showing 1921, a Polish map by Bazowicz showing central Lithuania. A Russian map showing Vilnius still in a blue Lithuania. A Funkin Wagnalls Poland and Lithuania map from 1921 showing Vilnius with a dotted line within Lithuania. A Time Survey Atlas of the World map, and a Myers Kleine Hand Atlas of Poland. And oops, did have one more. Edinburgh Geographical Institute, Europe, the Times Atlas showing Vilnius in Lithuania, two US atlases, the Time Survey Atlas of 1922 showing this still disputed area with this probably Polish area, and this 1922 Polish map, which is a reflection of what the boundaries actually were after 1922. And my last two maps, this is a 1923 C.S. Hammond map, the Baltic states, and a year later, the same map. And I'm just showing 4 cities on the map of 1923, or in Lithuania in 1924. They still had Polish names, but they were all now in Polish. So 6 years after the end of World War I, maps of the area were still being finalized. Being someone with roots in this area, living through the World War I, the 1920s, and you could never be sure where your ancestral home would wind up. Ačiū, which is Lithuanian for thank you. 2 links to areas where you can, my sites, where you can find out more about things Lithuanian. And thank you very much for attending.
Thank you, Andrew. Fascinating. And the thought that kept going through my mind is the questions that I said the people next week or next month are going to address. Who was making the map, and what was the use, and what was their intended use? I'm not sure you have to answer that because I think you've already answered that, but if you have a comment, go ahead.
Well, there were cartographers who were interested in depicting what was true on the ground, and they were following official government census ethnic information. But there were patriot cartographers going back to the beginning of the 19th century whose primary goal was the resurrection of an independent Polish state. And as time wore on, I think they played fast and loose with ethnic percentages. And you know what? They were successful. Those percentages were accepted by Isaiah Bowman's cartographic team. They were presented as American recommendations. France accepted them. Great Britain was a little iffy, but basically Poland got what it wanted. And Lithuania was limited to its ethnic boundaries pretty much. What they were really upset about was losing their historic capital, because it's, you know, it's kind of like if New York City were someday to be more than 50% Hispanic, that for some reason New York City shouldn't be part of New York State. It's it really doesn't matter. It was always a multi-ethnic city. It was a city of the world. They were sorry to lose it in the interwar years.
Okay, there are a number of questions in the chat. First one's from Roberta Stevens. How did the changing boundaries affect the language spoken by the Lithuanians? Was it common to speak Lithuanian and Polish?
Well, I think I'm reminded of when I think Melania Trump claimed to speak 8 languages. Sure, what she was able to say was, how much does that cost? And good morning and good afternoon. People in those areas had to have a working knowledge of being able to deal with a merchant, with a government official. So everyone, including my parents, spoke not only Lithuanian, but some Polish. They spoke some German. They could understand Yiddish because it was very similar to German. And they also spoke enough Russian to get along with their Russian neighbors. So it's not that they were equally fluent in all these languages, but if you were a census taker asking what their tongue, what is the primary language spoken in the household, the people within the Lithuanian boundaries pretty much said Lithuanian, and the people within other areas said what they spoke in the household. But everyone in that area had to have some familiarity with the other languages.
Okay, Andrew Parler Reynolds asks, please repeat again why the Baltic states were not invited to Versailles.
Poland was invited to Versailles as an independent state following World War I. It was recognized by the US 2 months after it claimed independence. The Baltic states were not recognized. As far as the great powers were concerned, if they existed at all before the end of World War I, it was as provinces of either Russia or Poland. And you can see from the maps that I showed, there certainly was a history of maps showing Lithuania as merely a province of Poland or not even being labeled within the boundaries of Poland. And that was the mindset of people who were responsible for determining who sat at the table. I hope that answers your question.
Okay. Bob Garfinkel, this is basically a comment. With Russia controlling Poland in 1911, my grandfather fled Poland because Jewish boys had little chance of surviving in the Russian army. He was 19 when he came to America via Germany. My grandmother's family came here in 1903 from Warsaw. She was 6 years old. Great talk.
Oh, thank you. By the way, there were actually quite a few Jewish soldiers in the Russian army, and of course they were, I think, almost to 100% extent drafted. There were also many Jewish soldiers within the Lithuanian Army of Independence, and as a result, they were part of the first parliament, and there were all sorts of accommodations, including the government subsidizing Yiddish schools in Lithuania in the early part of his existence. Later on, as rightist factions gained toeholds, that evaporated. But there were quite a few people who were Jewish and proud of fighting for Lithuania's independence, and they formed a significant minority.
Okay, Tim Weiskell says, thanks very much. Can you put the URLs of the two websites into the chat so that they can click on them? Or bring up the screen again?
Okay, well, it was, the one is LithuanianMaps.com and the other one is LithuanianJournal.org.
Okay. Okay, Jim Wilson. So what you seem to be saying is that part of Poland seized and absorbed by the USSR in 1939 had a rather tenuous connection to Poland and were really more Lithuanian and Belarusian in ethnicity.
No, I didn't say Lithuanian, Belarusian and Ukrainian. And I think that's a fact.
Okay, Jeff Katz, fascinating, from a descendant of folks from Zugar on the Lithuanian-Latvian border. Just a comment.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that?
Okay, fascinating, from a descendant of folks from Zagare on the Lithuanian-Latvian border.
Oh, got it, yeah.
Okay. Sorry about my pronunciations.
No, it's all right. I saw there was a chat from Roger. Carla, is that part of what you're looking at, or?
I'm sorry.
As you were talking, I saw up on the screen, there was a chat from Roger Karlovac asking about ethnic tensions in Lithuania today.
Well, go ahead with that. There are quite a few messages here.
Well, Latvia and Estonia had a very different history from Lithuania and Poland, not only because they were majority Protestant and their history, it consists of occupation by Swedes, by Germans, and by Russians. Lithuania and Poland is more just occupation by Russians. Um, Estonia and Latvia have significant Russian minorities, which is one of the reasons they're extremely concerned about what's happening with Ukraine. And on a daily basis, there is propaganda meant to support the Russian minorities in the eastern parts of both and Latvia. Lithuania never got that influx of Russians. Today, Lithuania's population is over 80% Lithuanian, and Russians and Poles form a small minority. So you rarely hear anything about tensions there. And the reason that Lithuanians are concerned about what's happening in Ukraine is because they share a border, not only with Belarus on the east, but with Kaliningrad, which is part of Russia on the west. But basically, it's a homogeneous country as opposed to Latvia and Estonia.
Okay, Justin and Robert Loeb, what was the rationale for giving Poland the city of Vilna, and was that fair?
Well, the rationale was an ethnographic map that showed that there was a high, I think on Domowski's map, it showed 83% Polish majority. That was why they got it, because the great powers said, well, it's majority Polish, it belongs to Poland. That was one of Wilson's 14 points, and the great powers agreed. Whatever the Lithuanians had to say about it, they couldn't deny that there was a very high proportion of Poles as well as of Jewish people in Vilnius. But again, it was a metropolitan city. In fact, the Grand Duchy, I think the closest parallel to today might be the former British Commonwealth, and that most of the land did not consist of Brits. It consisted of Indians and Africans, and but it was still part of the British Commonwealth. Well, the Vilna was always part of the Grand Duchy. It just had a minority of Lithuanians, and on that basis, it was ceded to Poland. The Lithuanians didn't think that was fair, but you don't always get what's fair.
Okay, Kassenbaum, from where does Estonia come?
Well, there are people, the Esti, who settled in that area maybe 4,000 or 5,000 years ago, who have a language that is most similar to the Finns and to Hungarians. Oddly enough, it's Finno-Ugric. And those people have a long history of being occupied first by the Swedes and then by the Russians. There was a part of hundreds of more years history where it was also, as well as Latvia, were considered vassal states of the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth. In other words, they paid a tithe so as not to be conquered, but they were always on their own. They were different people. They were not related ethnographically to either Lithuanians or to Poles. And after World War I, they saw an opportunity to two things: overthrow the Baltic Germans, who owned most of the land in both Estonia and Latvia. In fact, there was a 1905 uprising in Latvia where ethnic Latvians took up their pitchforks, and in scenes reminiscent of the end of the first Frankenstein movie, took pitchforks to the manor houses and slaughtered many, many thousands of Baltic Germans. Same sort of stuff happened north of them in Estonia, and when they saw there was a chance to declare independence based on ethnicity, and again, that was a key factor in deciding what new countries would be established during the peace process, they declared independence. They just had to wait 4 years to be recognized, as did Latvia and Lithuania.
Okay, we'll just do one or two more. Thanks for this is Stephen Nagler. Did any of the maps illustrating spoken language show evidence of the Kugel, Kigel, Yiddish dialect boundaries?
You'll actually find on my Lithuanianmaps.com site, I have pages by years, and the most recent page, which I think goes up to 1946, I have a couple of maps there from a friend, a Yiddish scholar, showing the boundaries of the Lithuanian Yiddish dialect called Litvish. And he determined those, by the way that Yiddish speakers pronounced things like dreidel and Latvia, you know, the different way they pronounced them was different in people speaking Litvish as opposed to Ukrainish, the Ukrainian dialect of Yiddish, and Polnish, the Polish dialect of Yiddish. And there's a map showing those boundaries, which are the same as the Pale of Settlement and the pre-1569 Union of Lublin boundaries of the Grand Duchy of Lithuania.
Okay, I'll do one more. I apologize to the other people who've put questions in. I just can't survey all of them real quickly. Okay, Roger Kalbach. Among the people living in Lithuania today, in the same...
That was already answered. That was already answered.
Okay, good. Thank you. Okay, well, let's just stop with that at the moment. We will open the room for more socializing, but before we do, I do want to thank you for your presentation, and we have gifts from the Washington Map Society. And I was able to get a set of note cards from the company Territory of New York City and area.
Thank you.
And then a cut line map of New York City.
Uh-huh.
So these will be something that you can at least identify with where you currently are.
Oh yeah, in fact, where I live now will be on both those.
Okay.
When you say you're going to leave this open for socialization, is there an opportunity for me to answer questions from people directly?
Yes, if people want to ask questions, that's fine. But if other people have to leave, that's fine too.
Yeah, I mean, I should stay on all evening to get the thank yous.
If anybody has any questions for Andrew, just please turn your mic on and speak up.
Andrew, a quick question about the use of language. You suggested in the response to your latest question that pronunciation was the metric for the discussion of what the legitimate language was, rather than, for example, grammatical constructions or phrases.
Well,
It's a very, because
Yiddish.
linguistically, that would be a very weak indication of a language, let alone whether the language is an indication of ethnicity.
The pronunciation, I was referring to dialects of Yiddish,
I see.
not dialects that were, and pronunciation variations between Polish, Lithuanian, Belarusian, Ukrainian, and Russian.
I see. So that was more based on grammatical distinctions, or?
Well, the census takers had a simple question: what is the primary language spoken in the household? That was it. And
Right.
the answer was determined the ethnicity that was assigned to that household. That was true both in the Russian census and in the German census.
It's fascinating because in general, the language question was huge for Africa and the Middle East, areas that also had to deal with questions of who should be assigned mandate territories from the former British and former German and Ottoman territories. And language there had a lot to do with whether mother tongue, not father tongue, was dominant.
Well, I think mother was being used as primary in those censuses, not necessarily what is the father, what is his language versus the mother.
I see. Thanks. Very great representation here.
Thank you. By the way, I'll be transforming this presentation into an article in the Portal app that will be more extensive and will have lots and lots of footnotes. So you'll get a lot more information than just from this presentation.
Andrew, this is Lorraine.
Hi there.
I'm wondering if you can comment on the activities and any influence of the Roman Catholic underground around 1918-ish.
Oh, and well, certainly they were extremely, you're talking about in Lithuania or in?
Yes, yeah. I know because my grandfather was carrying banned books, which were independence-based books put out by a group in 1918 called the Lithuanian National Truth Organization or something to that extent. I'm just wondering.
It's not an area that I'm very familiar with. I certainly know that Lithuanians and especially parish priests and bishops were very active in the independence movement. That was something that hurt them in subsequent occupations. Anyone who, I think the first people to go were always the intellectuals, the religious leaders, the college graduates, the activists, the troublemakers. And I certainly believe, based on my own experience, that Lithuanian Catholics could certainly be troublemakers and must have been a very strong voice for independent Lithuania. Hi, Jim. I hope you enjoyed this, Lorraine. Did I tell you anything you didn't know?
Yes, thank you.
Your mic's on.
My mic is on?
No.
Oh, I didn't know much about the past, the interim period between 1918 and through the beginning of World War II. So this was new to me.
Yeah, well, in creating a presentation like this, I think it's the best way to learn about it.
Mhm.
I had to find out about every piece of information I had. I had to double and triple check it. I had to look at Russian origin information, German. Thankfully, I have somewhat of a background in both so that I can, at one point I was pretty fluent in German and Russian. And believe me, it helps when you're looking at maps and also in things like the actual document of the 1917 German census made all the sense in the world to me, and I had never seen it anywhere else. And I finally found it through Books, and there was a German rare book dealer who actually had a copy of it. It's on its way to me, but meanwhile, I've been working with images of maps that were sent to me from that document on my promise to actually pay what they were asking for, which I will. I'm not aware of any other copy in existence.
Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Bob Garfinkel, you're on mute.
Okay,
There you
sorry
go.
about that.
Hi there.
Yeah, although I have a degree in history and mostly we did East European, I was unaware of all these wars that you talked about. They just aren't, I guess there's such minor little wars. We didn't cover any of that. It was just, the stuff going back to the German states and the formation of the Russian Empire and Soviet Union and such. So I want to thank you. I did learn a lot about all these, how the borders kept changing over and over again. It always seems so simple when you're taking history courses, and find out from you. Thank you very much about all how chaos it was after World War I.
Chaos is a good word for it. I did a presentation at the New York Public Library called How an Immigrant Found His Place in the World Through Maps. And as an example, I used the history of my father. And it was amazing to me as I created that presentation that he was born in Russia. He was occupied every couple of years by a different army, different war going on, was constantly being overrun. He joined the Lithuanian army and became one of the bodyguards to the president, Antanas Smetona. And Smetona left before the last Russian advance into Lithuania. And my father hoped to follow his lead and made it as far as Lake Constance in Switzerland, where an unfriendly Swiss patrol boat said, nope, go back to Germany, which was still under Nazi rule at the time. And that's basically what led to I was born in a German DP camp after the war ended. My parents stayed there for 5 years because US Congress did not want any of these people coming over. And who are they characterized? And this is by statements by people in Congress. They're either Nazis or commies. Their moral character is going to diminish the moral character of Americans. They're going to take American jobs. It was not until 1949 before they allowed the first people to come to the US. Sad.
Well, that's a lot of the same argument about the people from South America, Central America coming to America, how they're going to spoil America.
They're all just looking to better themselves. They're looking to escape a horrible situation. And I can have complete sympathy for anyone who tries to get into the United States, whether it's legal or illegal. If your family is at stake, I have sympathy.
I'm looking at.
Hi, this.
Go ahead.
This
I
is
had
Ed.
my question earlier.
This is Ed. I've got an observation. I am by ancestry a Litvak. My grandparents immigrated. Maternal grandparents immigrated from the Panevis area. And well, my observation is I never heard any suggestion from them that they were from anywhere other than Lithuania. So your excellent presentation is enlightening for me about the claims by Poland, but as far as they were concerned, they never mentioned any origin country other than Lithuania.
Thank you. And then if you have access to their immigration documents, their documents will say that either they came from Russia or Poland, because as far as US Customs was concerned, Lithuania did not exist. So you had to say you were from Russia or from Poland. And I am very much sympathetic to your story. I've been a member of Sig for 20 years. And there's a hot link at a Jewish end saying that I will help anyone who wants to create a site of their ancestral shtetl. I will provide images of that shtetl on antique maps, no cost. It's fun. It's something I want to do. And I personally make a donation every year for Jewish Gen for recovering the names of the people who were slaughtered, including in the town where my father's ancestors come from. It's a deep feeling of shame and regret for what happened there. I know I take this very personally.
Yes, I visited Panaviz. It was a moving experience, and met a gentleman there who heroically is maintaining a Jewish community center, trying to maintain the remnant of Jewish history there. So thank you very much for your interest and your presentation.
All right. And this might be a good time to tell people about a nonprofit that I've supported for many years. It's called Jewish Foundation for the Righteous, and they actually support Gentile rescuers of Jews who are considered righteous by Yad Vashem. And every year they support Lithuanian, Polish, Belarusian, Latvian, rescuers of Jews. And past Christmas, they sent over $300,000 in Christmas gifts to rescuers in these areas. You can actually say that you want your donation to go to Lithuanian rescuers, to Polish rescuers. And I think it's a commendable.
Thank you
for attending, and thank you for your comments. I have close relatives in Panevėžys.
Okay, I think it's probably time now to conclude the online presentation. For all of those who are interested in pursuing this more, I think Andrew said he will be preparing an article for the Portaland, and the video of this presentation will be on the Washington Map Society members only site. So you can explore both of those more in the future. Again, thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Wonderful.
Pleasure.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, Andrew. I'm interested in an earlier period, but it's very parallel, and it has to do with the way cartography can help people locate themselves in a fracture zone, that is one that's been disputed. And the historical cartography is crucial for that. There's a whole section of Hungary that was known for a while as Esclavonia, because that's where the Turks would get slaves for the galleys in the Eastern Mediterranean. And it became a kind of marked area on various maps that disappears. They're in maps of Turkey in Europe, as they're called at the time. But then when the Hungarians, the Austro-Hungarians, drive the Turks back down beyond Budapest, they then become not Esclavonia, but Slavonia. And they're just renamed on the same set of areas in these maps. But the nomenclature is crucial, and it's very interesting to see, because there are people moving at the same time. It isn't just a question of maps being redrawn. There are large movements of population. Thanks so much for such a great discussion.
Thank you. Good night, all.
Thank you.